Mass, pipes and drums! By the center! Quick! March!
Are we rolling?
We're rolling. Welcome to the show where Tim pretends to be taller than everybody. Because he's on a
Why are you starting the show?
Because you were taking too long.
I wanted to start the show because I like.
Welcome to another edition of the Terror of Demons morning show, reclaiming traditional Catholic masculinity with the author himself and special guest host Joe Boca.
He's here to help.
Are you here to help us?
I'm here to help.
This is the CEC edition.
CIC.
CEC.
Catholic Identity.
CEC. That's the.
CIC. Yeah.
That's
This guy's never done a podcast before.
That's the name of my son's first grade is CEC, Classical Enrichment Curriculum. So we're coming at you with all sorts of important topics that we're going to discuss this morning because it is clearly 3 a.m. where we're at. And we're joined by the Mass of the Ages crew is behind the camera right now.
Yeah.
We have Mr. Cameron Ahern himself is right there, but he can barely contain his laughter because he's about to burst forth with enthusiasm about Lord of the Rings board game expansion set number 6. And there's his laugh, everyone.
Let's go play.
Let's go play. Let's stop this podcast.
What is that?
Dude,
There's Lord of the
Oh
Rings.
my god.
Cameron Ahern is a board game Jedi master.
A board game
Okay?
genius.
They're called board games.
That was Cameron Ahern right
They're
there.
called board games because they make you bored.
Oh, whoa. There's about to be a fight on set here.
I tend to agree.
So before we came on in there, you were saying Andrew Jackson was your favorite American history person, right?
I love this. This is great. Andrew Jackson was a despicable tyrant who
Dude.
disgraced the presidency of the United States and should not be on our money.
America is crypto-Catholic. You forget this.
We're having a whole off-screen debate.
I wonder if Tim Gordon likes Andrew Jackson.
I never asked him about
I don't know.
Andrew Jackson. I mean, we usually.
I respect. I was trying to concede to Tim, and Tim might see this. So respect to Tim. I don't agree with Tim on everything he says, but I would take Andrew Jackson over Alexander Hamilton because I'm an anti-federalist.
Yeah,
So,
necessarily.
yes.
For our viewers that don't know, the Alexander Hamilton versus Thomas Jefferson debate is what defined your country, and you're dealing with the consequences right now, whether you know it or not. If you know this.
Speaking of a country that's way better than America, as we record this is the last day of the government of Canada caring about my health. So on
Today?
Today.
I thought it was like last week.
So this is the last day. So you can get into the States. They don't care. They don't ask. It's not a big deal. But you guys have laws, but don't follow them. I like that about America. But
America.
yeah. But first Saturday is, as we record this, tomorrow.
Yes.
So I'm taking this. Everyone's going to get mad at me here. But the consecration of Russia, I believe, was valid. And the fruits of that have been Roe versus Wade being overturned, which is, that alone is unbelievable. But also, first Saturday is tomorrow, and I believe Our Lady is liberating my country. What do you say to that? That's pretty cool, right?
I'll take that. I'll put that in there, yeah. I mean,
Well, I saw you made a face when he said that he thought the consecration was valid. What do you?
I mean, I'm not opposed to that. I'm just not ready to die on that hill.
I will die on it.
He's ready to die on the hill. I'm not ready to die
I'll
on the hill.
die on that hill
but
because Bishop Schneider will die on that hill, and he's smarter than all of us.
that's true. I will give you that.
That is true.
Just saying.
Absolutely. Bishop Schneider is smarter than all of us.
He's actually holy.
We had a beautiful pontifical high mass at Most Precious Blood Parish earlier today with His Excellency Bishop Schneider. It was fantastic. It was my first pontifical. It was your first pontifical. Was it your first too?
It was, yeah.
It was all of ours first pontifical. They had a lot more vestments moving around.
Yeah, can anyone explain that? What do you guys know? You guys probably been to more pontifical. What's with the vesting? Like the bishop takes all the.
I don't know what's with it.
I don't even know.
No.
That was pretty cool.
That was fantastic.
You just filmed it.
But the question is, will that pontifical mass be in Mass of the Ages episode 3? Will it make the cut, or maybe it'll make the director's cut?
I think it probably would. Yeah, certain shots from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, since I'm an amateur, my cigar is fading away.
Looks like a
See,
burrito.
That's one of the benefits when you grow up in Fidel Castro's favorite proxy kingdom with his son King Trudeau II. You know, there's actually, I'm not joking, there's actually amazing evidence that way stronger than the Obama Muslim thing, like actual really super like strong evidence that Trudeau is the love child of Fidel Castro.
Aside from the fact that they look the same.
Yeah, but besides that, because you could mess with that. But there's actually his mom, Maggie Trudeau, Margaret Trudeau. She was basically like a groupie of like rock bands and stuff, and communists, same thing. And so she was in Cuba.
I heard Castro's like an insane adulterer, right?
Yeah, he's a communist.
Yeah,
so
that's what they do.
They're all a bunch of perverts. But so she was in Cuba when Pierre, Trudeau's father, wasn't, around the time that she would have had to conceive.
But that's just like
And
gossip.
no, it's real. There's like flight records and stuff. Someone sent me research on it, and I was actually convinced. I was just like, that's silly. This is
seems
just
like a
the
tabloid.
internet. But no, but there was an actual like really close friendship between Trudeau and Trudeau's dad and Castro in like a weird way. His dad was a communist.
Like that kind of way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like Trudeau's dad was an actual communist. He started the Trudeau's dad is one of the greatest enemies of Catholicism in the history of the world. He started a newspaper. It's called La Cité, I think. Anyway, I might be wrong on that. But it was a Marxist newspaper that was kind of like Charlie Hebdo in France, and it was to mock the church. And it was the publication that was spread around for the La Révolution Tranquille, the Quiet Revolution.
Okay.
And Trudeau's dad brought in the law that decriminalized abortion in Canada. Another thing about Trudeau's dad, he was one of the worst things to ever happen to the Native people in Canada. So he put forth laws that made them continual wards of the state, which means they act like they're under the law of Canada. If they live off the reserve, they're like a minor.
So who was worse to the natives, Andrew Jackson or Trudeau's dad?
Both. I mean, they're both.
Because the whole thing with Andrew Jackson is that there was the 5 civilized nations,
Right.
the Indians,
Right.
who had assimilated. They tried to work with the United States, and then Andrew Jackson wanted to remove them to the West, and they appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in their favor and said, yes, they've assimilated. We should protect them. They're U.S. citizens. Andrew Jackson said, let them enforce it, and then he took the army and pushed them out.
Okay, so that's very different than what Trudeau's was more of a Alinskyite. Andrew Jackson's was just straight up thuggery, right?
Forceful in the way he was. Yeah.
It was just thuggery, right?
Yeah.
Let's call it what it is. But with Trudeau's dad, it was Alinskyite, very ambiguous, weaponized ambiguity kind of language, and they're economically depressed as a result of Trudeau's death. So last year, when the hoax about the mass graves that don't exist, that's a whole other thing, they found community cemeteries is what they found, which the natives themselves said, yeah, there's a lot of white people buried here too, because it was the community. Anyway. That was, all that rage was based off of the fact that Trudeau's dad essentially had put them in a perpetual state of, it's like the welfare state, but tied to an ethnicity.
I think Trudeau's dad wins the worst.
His is like a devastation.
I can deal with Trudeau I can deal with Andrew Jackson because he's not ultimately a communist.
Right.
He's just
wrong.
He's just an Anglo manifest destiny idiot. And Trudeau's dad's a communist. Yeah.
What do you think, Joe?
Joe, what you give us the verdict?
Well, I gave a short defense, but not that hearty of a defense of Andrew Jackson. But I mean, you know,
What he did to Catholic Florida, though, that's what I really hate too, because Catholic Florida was an amazing civilization.
You go more into that because I'm not.
Well, there's the Seminole Indian tribe, which is a Catholic Indian tribe of mixed race Indian, black, and Spanish.
Okay.
They're all they got like black
It's like Creole
Indians.
almost. It's like Creole.
Yeah, but because the Spanish Empire allowed Spanish Florida would the slaves escape to Spanish Florida and they could be free, and they as long as they became Catholic. And so you have this whole Catholic civilization in Florida. The first mass in the continental United States was in St. Augustine, Florida.
What year was that?
It was like late 1500s. I don't know the exact year.
So Canada was Catholic first
Canada was Catholic first.
because it was like early 1500s.
Canada? No, really?
Yeah.
Champlain comes in and like.
Do you know when the first mass in North America was?
It wasn't St. Augustine.
No, it was under. It was
Or it was
under.
in Mexico.
No, it was under the Vikings.
Really?
Okay, so
Oh boy.
did you know the term? You ever heard the term Vinland? So Vinland was the, and this is why global warming is ridiculous.
Man, we're hitting everything. I love this.
Yeah. So
We got it all figured out here. Now that we've got our cigars,
It's true.
and we're on the back porch with Mass of the Ages. Now we're
right.
really cooking here.
What board game is this?
I don't know. So,
Dude, this is the board game of civilizing.
History.
This is the board game of
Risk.
North American Christendom.
Risk.
This
So-
is the board game of North American Christendom.
so Vinland was Greenland, Newfoundland, and some say even as far in as basically Ontario. Because that whole area was actually quite warm at the time. So when you read English history, for example, under the Roman Empire, they talk about having these long growing seasons where they could grow grapes and all this sorts of stuff, which you can't do in the same place as today in England. It was warmer back in the time of the Roman Empire. That's one of the reasons when they, called the Dark Ages. It actually got darker because it was colder. There was less sun. That's like, so it's like one of those myths that turns into it anyway. So Eric the Red, Leif Erikson was his relative.
This is like 900s, right?
I know. So the first it's arguable because
This is not established historical.
this is established.
proof.
I'm establishing it. So
This is not
no, but
established.
seriously,
It's
so
about
Leif,
to be.
This is disputed among scholars.
but like not smart scholars.
No, real scholars.
Okay. So
Okay.
Leif Erikson brought over priests because the Vikings he was a Catholic Viking, which is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
So he brought over priests, and they were able to grow grapes in Newfoundland and Greenland. That's how warm it was. Think about that. So global warming actually apparently it's good for anyway. So
Grapes for the sacrament.
yeah. So the reason they called it Vinland is because they could grow vines. It means the land of the vines.
Wow, that's
So
fascinating.
so you bring priests over. Odds are they're saying mass.
Of course
Call me
it's-
crazy, right? And they were there for 150, 200 years or so, right? And then it got really cold because global cooling happened, probably because of Greta Thunberg missed that one. But
There was global cooling because they were building.
really big refrigerators. Yeah. So, in any case, the Catholic faith came to Newfoundland about 1,000 years ago. That's a fact.
There you have it. It's established fact. It's that reminds me of one of my favorite parts about the Roman Rite. Is
Is this Viking?
No, it has to do with the Vikings because it's the reading of the gospel to the north, which
right.
is the direction of the barbarians and ultimately the Vikings.
That's right.
I love that because it's just that was our forefathers pressing the gospel to the north, fearlessly taking on the crazy Celtics and all these crazy Vikings and everything.
But none of that symbolism matters anymore.
And if
Because modern man doesn't understand
the Italian politics has always been corrupt, always. If it wasn't so corrupt and those Italian kings could see straight and had money to give Christopher Columbus, you guys would all be speaking Italian. Because Columbus was Italian.
Yes.
Yeah, that bugs me to this day as an Italian. I can't stand that. You guys should all be speaking Italian right now. We should, it's the best language. We should all be speaking it.
I thought French was the best.
French is second best.
French is second best to Italian?
Yes.
What about Latin?
Charles Coulomb, no one ever spoke Latin as a vulgar language. That's a lie. That's why people say the language, people will tell you,
As a common language.
No one ever spoke ecclesial Latin as a common language.
Ecclesial Latin.
And no one ever spoke Ciceroan Latin unless they were educated.
Right.
So when people say, I did a talk on the new Mass, hopefully it'll be uploaded soon. But anyway, this idea that there was ever a vernacular liturgy in the Roman Empire is false. If you want to know what Latin is Spanish, Latin is Italian, Latin is Gallego, Latin is various dialects. The educated Latin was spoken by 10% of the population. That's why it was established as a liturgical language, because it couldn't be vulgarized. So even when they say, oh, the Latin Mass is really just a vulgar rite that's old, it's actually false, because it wasn't the vehicular language of the civilization. Otherwise, they would have had it in the language of Rome, which would have been a dialect of some sort of Southern Italian.
Yeah, the only precedent for any vernacular liturgy in the Roman Rite is China.
Yes.
Yeah.
China.
Mandarin. Yeah. So when Father Matteo Ricci was doing his
there we go.
his missionary work there, he was able to get a Mandarin translation of the Missal authorized.
But was that a vulgar language for the Chinese, or was it a sacred imperial court language?
I think, from what I understand, it would have been their day-to-day language, but
it would have been a vehicular version of it. I'm sure it's probably like Slavonic.
The reason,
right?
Church Slavonic would have been the vernacular at the time.
No. Church Slavonic was made by Saint Cyril Methodius.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was, because the Slavs did not have an alphabet, but they had various languages that had the various structures that they all share. So they put together Church Slavonic as a way of having a language that they could all understand through very little study, because it met their criteria, but that would not be used for daily speech. So you couldn't, you go to Mass, you don't hear a word that sounds like a swear word, right? That's the problem with vulgar language, right? Because, it's like you hear the word whatever, and it's like, well, I use that all the time to make fun of somebody. I can't concentrate on praying when I hear that. So Slavonic was an example of taking the vernaculars and turning it into a sacred language intentionally.
Now, I've heard that the Hebrew Psalter is in fact written in an ancient Hebrew tongue as well. That's not even the Hebrew that they would have been.
That's where you get the bagel recipe from.
The bagel recipe.
The Jews make bagels. That's where you get the bagel. It's an ancient Hebrew recipe. I just made that up.
Okay. He just made that up. So how much of what he just said, all of this...
Everything I said was true except for that.
What do you think, Joe? You're here to help. I need your help.
Well, they do make great bagels.
That settles it.
Coming from New York,
that settles it. Yeah, you got a lot of... Do you still have, like, solid Jewish ghettos? And you got, like, the Hasidic...
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, I'm a Long Islander. But if you travel a bit west of where I live, you will run into parts of Brooklyn where it's all Jewish. You will run into parts of what we call Nassau County, which is western Long Island, that are predominantly Jewish. The Lower East Side of Manhattan has some of the best Jewish delis out there.
Yeah.
Katz's Delicatessen, famously, Bernstein's. Yeah. They're fantastic. Some of the best bagels, some of the best Reubens. But to the question of vernacular liturgy, one of the reason, from what I understand, that they let the Chinese have their translation was because where they were geographically.
Until the Dominicans got involved in that.
Well, the Dominicans, as far as Asia is concerned, the Dominicans ruined everything.
Ooh, so you're on the Jesuit side of that.
I'm 100% on the Jesuit side there. I mean,
Wow.
they were doing a great job until the Dominicans and our friends.
I
the
have a
Thomists came
friend
over
in
and ruined it.
I have a friend in Singapore who tells me that in the 20th century, the Jesuits were more or less vindicated in that debate.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, I don't think there's any
There was actually like
Chinese rights controversy.
Yeah, there was a statement on that from Rome at some point.
I thought Pius XII started to allow more
I think it
Chinese
was.
or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, the reason they allowed it in China to begin with was because geographically they were isolated from heresy for the most part.
Yeah, and it also makes
It's not like they were near Luther.
No, but also, again, they take the language that they take a language that will be usable, and if you don't have the same alphabet, the same language structure, having everyone learn a version of Latin, it's going to be like a really hard sell, just practically speaking.
Yeah.
So if you can find a language like Slavonic,
Correct.
You know, it's like we could teach them Latin, but none of them speak this. They can't pronounce it. They have different consonants and so forth.
Right. That's why to the east, Church Slavonic is not to the east what Latin is to the west.
No, it's not.
If you go to I've been to a Church Slavonic liturgy and I've been to a vernacular Ukrainian liturgy.
Yeah.
Very, very similar.
Yeah.
Not, so if you go to that, then versus, say, if you go to an English Mass versus if you go to a Latin Mass, it's a major difference.
So what about the Anglican ordinariate? So this is my little elevator pitch.
Here we go.
English is old now.
Elizabethan English, isn't
Yeah,
it?
like so English is old now. Like let's call it.
Don't.
It's really
It's
about
not
450
English.
years old as an actual vehicular language. In fact, the English royal family, up until I think the mid 1800s, they still spoke French as their first language.
Huh.
Yeah, because English is French. That's why when you hear English people speak and they have the non-rhotic er on the end, it's because French is non-rhotic, so they don't pronounce the r's.
Is this accurate, Reading man?
I mean, the English language is heavily based on the French language.
Yeah.
Most of our vocabulary comes from French.
And the Hanoverians spoke
Anything that
German,
ends
though.
Isation,
That's right.
anything that ends like center, theater, those
Yeah.
kind of words. I mean, you keep the same spelling as we do.
Yeah.
The right
The
spelling.
RE.
The Queen's English.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, the King's
Yeah,
English.
but that comes from the French.
Yes, it does.
Color, for example.
Spell with a U.
U-R. That comes from the French. That's why we spell it weird.
Yeah.
According to Americans.
Yeah.
Well, this gets into another interesting question about Elizabethan English. And
You're gonna bring it up.
yeah, and the King James Catholic edition, which the ordinary
It's not the Catholic. It's for Catholics. They made
that what it says?
Well, they made it clear because there's
King
no,
James for
yeah.
Catholics.
by the
It's
ordinary.
by the Anglican
Any
ordinary.
translation that cannot figure out what Kekari Sumini means
by
as
Catholics
full
for
of grace,
Catholics.
they don't understand Greek, and they don't understand. They can't. They're messing with the Protestants.
But
Imposed that because they hated the Virgin Mary.
So I'm gonna. Who's
That's
gonna
why the
have-
King
who's gonna
James
have-
Bible should be rejected. There you have it. Read my book. I wrote a book about it.
Is that right?
Yes.
I
you have to do is
I did not write a book about it.
Go to the
I'm just thinking-
Annunciation. If you're going to check any Bible translation, just go to the Annunciation, Luke chapter 1, like verse 30. And the angel said unto her, Hail full of grace.
You know what I've heard?
That it's a legit translation. If it says anything but full of grace, it's not legit.
Well, we're not saying that we're not saying that is.
Well, no, but the ordinary, in fairness, they put out notes with the King James Catholic, not Catholic edition, but edition for like individual readership for Catholics.
you and me.
Yeah.
At least,
The lay person.
To its credit, the
Or
King
Greek.
James Version does say, Behold, a virgin shall conceive.
Yes.
Even the NAB, I think it's the NAB, I can't remember which one. There's a chart in my book. It's the NAB or the RSV. One of them's like, Behold, a young woman shall conceive.
Yeah.
Boy, is that miraculous.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bad.
That's
But
miraculous.
the ordinary, though, they did put out notes saying there's like 3 points in this thing that we correct with like the footnotes.
Right.
That's their idea.
And they put the Deuterocanonicals back in their proper order.
Yeah.
So, I mean, according to Benedict, they were allowed to.
That's a trip because I can't stand Cranmer, and like the whole English Reformation, like it's ridiculous with the whole
I
all
mean,
that stuff.
I'm completely supportive of the English ordinariate. I think it's
course.
fantastic. This is ecumenism at its best right here. This is
You're a modernist.
And now it's not ecumenism.
But
No, but that makes it-
Holy Mother Church always makes it easy for her lost sheep to come back in the fold and does not burden them beyond what is necessary for the essentials of the faith.
Right.
And so we're going to ordain married men because that doesn't prevent the ordination to be valid.
Right.
We're going to allow them to have their various traditions, even if they're crammed right, as long as they're not against the
As long
faith.
as it's been Catholicized, and
Yeah.
there's non-offensive parts you can keep,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
like drinking
But the-
tea.
this is true ecumenism.
Okay, so what you're saying is that Pachamama is not an idol.
It's Our Lady of the
I
Apple.
knew it. It was actually just imprudent for the Pope to
That's
do it.
uncharitable.
It is.
man.
That's uncharitable.
It is. It's also schismatic.
Oh boy. Oh,
Problematic.
So how amazing was Father Mausoley's talk tonight, though?
Oh,
boy. It
gosh.
was fire. It was
It
fire.
was unbelievable.
It was fire. So Father James Maudsley
He's really intelligent.
Maudsley gave a talk tonight. It was the keynote address at CIC, and he got like 4 or 5 standing ovations during the speech. He was running out of time because everybody was
clapping so much.
clapping so much.
Yeah.
I mean, what were the throwaway lines? What were the
Standing ovation.
standing
lines.
ovations? I
Well,
mean,
one of them had to do with.
Don't say it on YouTube.
I know.
oh yeah,
I was
doing that
already,
thing
I was
with
already
that
pre-
thing.
The thing,
that was
you know,
the
with,
thing.
you know, your
was
blood.
the devil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know to what we refer.
Something to do
Yeah.
with cold and flu season, but that's as far as we'll go.
Yeah, but
I know what not to say on YouTube.
I mean, I think just
Never be a bad
asking the
boy.
bishops to publicly repent for their betrayal of the faithful, for shutting down the most essential service for our souls,
In relation to what, Tim?
in relation to that thing.
A respiratory illness that the government
Everybody knows
told
what
us the
we're
truth
talking
about,
Everybody knows what we're talking
right? Come on.
Trust the government, everybody.
We're
You
all
heard
in
it
this,
here first.
We're all in this together. We're stronger together when we're apart.
Trust the plan.
Yeah, there you
Oh
go.
boy.
Trust the experts.
Oh, that's a different
Science
thing.
has changed.
So I love Maudsley. I mean, not everybody's going to agree with it. I mean, what I liked about what Michael Matt really has presented at this conference is that he's really he puts his money where his mouth is in terms of true unite the clans. He says we are here to be Catholics together and to fight this fight together, and we're not going to all agree about particular actions.
Yeah.
And especially for priests who are in a situation where their conscience is accusing them.
Yeah.
And he even made a case for the priests who don't like take a huge stand and they choose to go along with it because they're trying to protect their flock. You know, and we understand those priests and we want to support those priests too. And not, you know, we're in wartime right now. This is war. And in war, people take different sides. It's like Vichy France and the resistance.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, like,
That's right.
we can't be like France at that time, like Gaullist France wanted to execute Pétain after the war.
That's right.
Like, we have to understand that we are at war,
Yeah.
and everybody's going to take some different particular actions which our conscience may not allow us to take. But as lay people, we have the freedom to speak a lot more freely.
Yeah.
And because we're fathers of children and we're trying to form our children and we want our children to have their right to have reverent mass, to form them in the faith, and we're willing to fight clerics over it.
It is their right, and sadly we live in an age of civil rights, meaning everything's a right, right? But rights are attached to duties, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the reason you have a right to a traditional liturgy that edifies your faith rather than tears it down is because it's your duty to worship God, and if you are going to worship God, He's God. Therefore, the worship must be worthy. So I was thinking about Father. I wrote these notes down during Father Maudsley's talk, and he's so smart. He brought up basically the teleological end of what a priest is. And my wheel started spinning. It's like, well, what is a priest? Well, a priest exists to offer an unblemished sacrifice for the remission of sins. So it presupposes that his purpose on earth is to offer the sacrifice, to offer the victim. That's what sacrifice is, and then to consume it, because that's what he has to do as per the Bible. So it's also the natural law. So since this is being offered to God, it is implicit that the sacrifice that's offered must be worthy of being offered to God. And this is what we see with Cain and Abel. So when people say, well, as long as he does the sacrifice, it's going to be valid. No. God will reject certain sacrifices because they are not befitting of being offered to God. And that is the crux of the liturgical wars. It's not about, we prefer traditional Latin Mass because we like lace and incense. Lace and incense is great, but to be honest, I actually kind of cough a little bit whenever I have too much incense, It gives me a little cough in my throat. But I know that this period we're living in right now, we only have to get to like the fourth chapter of Genesis, and we see that you can offer a sacrifice to God that is unworthy of being offered to Him, and your response to that will be murderous rage if you choose to side against what God desires of you. And that's what the Church has done with Traditionis Custodes, is they've unleashed essentially a murderous rage on tradition, and they're metaphorically killing killing Abel over and over again. Rather than saying Abel was right, we'll offer the worthy sacrifice, they'll say we'll kill Abel and offer the one that's subpar. And you can't do that. Anything else? How much time we got?
That's it.
You've been
We keep
going for 7.5 minutes.
before it dies. So
You got 7 minutes till it dies?
You'll want to capture the wrap up within 7 minutes.
That
9-minute monologue.
Yeah.
that was fantastic because this is what I write in my book, and what Saint Augustine says. Saint Augustine says that Cain is the founder of the earthly city because he refuses to
Right.
offer the sacrifice rightly.
That's right.
Because God tells him if you offered rightly, you would not be in sin. And
That's right.
there is an external worship, which is worthy in and of itself, because it is a perfect offering on the externals.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the externals are meant only to make our internal offering of our hearts
Yeah.
more worthy, because the externals draw our hearts more to the divine.
Yeah.
And that's why the Latin Mass is the worthy sacrifice, because it ultimately draws one's heart to the divine
Yeah.
in a more penetrating way. Now, if you offer the Latin Mass as this prideful Pharisee, it will still be rejected because
Yes.
you're a wicked Pharisee,
Yeah.
and you're saying, and the publican is received, obviously,
Yeah.
because his heart is in the right place. But the externals are what draw our hearts, because we're not angels, we're embodied souls, we're spirits in our bodies, we're with our bodies, we're persons. And so all these externals are important because every single culture has recognized the beauty of the cultus must be represented perfectly and offered up to God. Joe, what are your thoughts? And we'll close out.
I was thinking about Luther. Nothing more abominable than the Catholic Mass. And he was dealing with the Latin Mass. Luther knew, we were having a conversation about this morning, and Luther knew the implications of the Catholic liturgy and what it meant to the real presence and what it meant to the idea of sacrifice and all that. Luther wanted to, like we were saying, retain an idea of real presence, but the ultimate goal of the Protestant and the modernist is to get rid of the priesthood, the sacerdotal priesthood, which is what he tried to do. But in his dialogue with Zwingli, Zwingli wanted to be rid of the real presence completely, and Luther said, exclaimed, "Well, if you get rid of the real presence, you're going to demolish Christianity." And Zwingli says to Luther, "Well, you got rid of the priesthood, so you are responsible for this."
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
this undermining of the idea of sacrifice and undermining the sacerdotal priesthood, which is what, for instance, Archbishop Lefebvre,
That's right.
that's the whole purpose, the raison d'etre of the Society of St. Pius X existing, for instance,
Yeah.
is not merely to preserve the Latin Mass, but
Preserve
to
the
preserve the doctrine of the priesthood
Yes.
specifically. A lot of
Right.
people say that when all is made right, and
That's
Lefebvre
why it's
is-
Pius X is the priesthood. That's why it became
Correct.
is
Yeah.
the priesthood, yeah.
But there's this idea that if perhaps he'll be a doctor of the priesthood at some point.
Yes.
But this preservation of the priesthood is not merely something that we need in defense of modernism. It's life or death for Christianity. It's existential. So, as the Protestants do, they're wise enough to Luther in his way was wise enough to see that without this real presence,
It goes away.
it all goes away.
Goes away.
And Zwingli even was able to see that, well, without the priesthood too, it's all gone.
This is what people don't understand about Lefebvre too. He was saying the modifications of the liturgy, 64 missal, whatever the ones we're after, and he admitted that the way of offering the updated missals up to the Novus Ordo, he never said the Novus Ordo. There's a third-hand Sedevacantist account out there that certain apologists like to use to say that Lefebvre said the Novus Ordo. He didn't say it because if he had said it, we wouldn't have been in trouble because the deal from Rome was say the Novus Ordo and all would be fine. So why would they say that if he already said it? Anyway, but he said a major thing for him was the cutting out of the many genuflections. Lefebvre admitted that he was beginning to lose his faith in the real presence. Now that is relative, meaning obviously he believed, but relatively speaking, he had less of an intimate connection with the presence of Christ in the Eucharist because of the changes.
Yeah, I think that to me the double genuflection is when the consecrated host becomes Jesus Christ, and the priest does not bow.
That's right.
That's
Well, that's anti-scriptural.
It's a significant moment in the Novus Ordo liturgy. That's why in good Novus Ordos they always add the double genuflection in. But
the double genuflection is not in the rubrics, though, correct?
That's true.
That's illicit then.
No,
So what you're saying is
that would be a
with all that,
you go your schism if you go to Novus Ordo. Is what you're saying.
Well, I think I'll quote, since you're quoting Lefebvre, I'll have to quote Karol Wojtyła here and say that when you absolutize an aspect of this thing, Luther absolutized one aspect of it that was hitting on one thing that was corrupted, and we cannot absolutize one aspect of the Mass. We need the whole Mass for the whole faith.
That's right.
For the whole heart of every man, woman, and child. Let's pray. Nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Jesus.
Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.
Our Lady of Victory,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph, terror of demons,
Pray for us.
Saint Anthony of the Desert, pray for all clergy and seminarians. In nomine Patris et Filii Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Jesus is King.
Deus Vult.
That's it.
Does your live studio audience applaud?
It's like slam poetry. You gotta go. One of those things. So those are